Hello everyone, my name is Parnali Dharia. I'm a woman international master and today the topic is Zugzwang. So what do you mean by a Zugzwang? Zugzwang is a position where the person who's to move has a disadvantage. So in this position, this is not a Zugzwang, but after King c6 is played, it's a Zugzwang because if black moves, if he plays King g5, then King d7 and King f5, King d6, so he'll end up losing this pawn. So basically here this is a position where black is in Zugzwang and whatever he plays he is going to lose. So for King f5, white will just play King d6 and again black will have to move. This is another Zugzwang example where if it's black to play, then he'll probably end up losing the e6 pawn. Can you just Hello guys, so today's topic is Zugzwang. I'm sorry, there's some construction work going on, so that's why the background noise. So Zugzwang is basically a position where whoever is to play has some disadvantage or advantage, so it depends. For example, King c6 is the only correct move. If King d6 was played and here black plays King f5, so now here if it's white to play, then he will end up e5, he will end up losing e5 pawn, and if it's black to play, he'll end up losing the e6 pawn. So this is a Zugzwang. Let's see a few examples, we'll see a few games. And Zugzwang is one of my favorite topics because in games when you play that, you usually suffocate your opponent and it becomes really nice. Hello Insane Devil. So let's move on to the next game. Okay, so this game was played between Friedrich Samish and Aaron Nimzowitsch, and this is one of the most immortal Zugzwang games because there's a Zugzwang in a middle game position which is very rare, and now it's common because of AlphaZero and because of the new engines. But back then when it was played in 1923 in Copenhagen, Denmark. So back then when it was played, it was a very beautiful example. So let's have a look at it. d4, nf6, d4, e6, and now knight f3 was played. In case you have some problems with like b6, then you can play g3 first to avoid b6. That will help you. I mean, if you're a Catalan player and you don't want b6, then you should play g3 first. Zugzwang is basically whoever is to play has an advantage or disadvantage depending on the position. So in chess you can't really give a pass, right? So you can't just say that I can't move, so I'll give a pass. Like Ludo, you get you want one on the dice, but you get 4, so you skip. So in chess that's not allowed. So that's basically Zugzwang. You have to make a move, and making that move would mean that you're losing a piece or you're getting mated or there's some disadvantage to it in most cases. Okay, so nf3, b6, g3, bishop b7, bishop g2, bishop e7. This is all theory. Castles, and d5, knight e5. Okay, now c6. So by c6, black is making sure that his pawn structure is solid and he just wants to take it slow. He doesn't want a pawn break in the position, and later on he can decide what he wants to do with this knight. It can even go to a6, then rook c8, knight c7 is possible, or knight d7. So it's up to him, and later on in the game, if it is required, he can always play c5 if and when it is required. But for now it's a very solid pawn structure, and this setup with white is something that I like to play because I play Catalan, but I like the knight on d2 and I don't like knight e5, so slightly different. But with black it's the same pawn structure. Okay, cd5, cd5. Now the c file is open for both the rooks. That's the reason black captured with the c pawn. When I was a beginner, I would often find it difficult to understand how to capture, but it is a good rule that you should always capture towards the center. So central files are the E and D files, so it's always good to capture with this pawn in most cases. So c into d5 was played, and it's the same open file as white, because if he captured, then it would be a semi-open file for white, the c file, and the e file would be semi-open file for black. Sorry, this e file, if he had captured with the e pawn. Bishop f4 was played, a6. So the point here is to play b5 and to take control of this square, because it can be a strong outpost square for this knight here. So it can go to c6, then a5, and then sit on this nice outpost square. Also, after b5 is played, you have this knight d7, knight b6, and knight c4. So in any case, the knight can go to c4. And yeah, a into d5, c5 is possible. That's what I mentioned just before. It is played, and it can be played, but I think Nimzowitsch wanted to open the c file and play in the c file. That's the reason he played c into d5. But a into d5 is possible. Like, it's a different theory again. Bishop f4, a6 in order to play b5 and have the c4 square for the knight, a stronghold. Rook c1, and now b5. As I mentioned, the knight is planning to go to c6, then a5. The rook will be here on c8, and this c4 square will be very important. While the white knight can't really go to c5 that quickly. He can obviously play knight d3 and then this, but my bishop is already controlling the square. Sorry for the representation, I'll just do it again. Knight d3 and then knight c5 is possible for white here, but because of this bishop, it's slightly difficult to get a knight on the c5 square. And this square is not that protected because the bishop is already on the g2 square, so it can no longer play bishop into c4. So that's the reason c4 is a good square for the knight. Queen b3 was played, and now knight c6. So in Nimzowitsch notes in the My System book, he said that he called this move the ghost, because suddenly this queen is going to be under attack soon, and this is what black wanted to do. So he's going to get an extra tempo here after knight a5, and that's the reason he captured here, b into c6. And you might be wondering that bishop on c6 here is a bad bishop because it is blocked by its own pawns, right? But that's not the case, because soon there will be a pawn roller on this side and the bishop will go to b5, which is a great square because it will control this diagonal and this pawn, and even the c4 square. Again, c4 square is very important. So here h3 was played. So h3, I think he just wanted to play king h2 or just have something. He just wanted to wait, probably. That's the reason he played h3. So h3 is a waiting move. He didn't really know what to do, and he was waiting for black to reveal his plan. That's the reason he played h3. And now queen d7 was played. So can you tell me what black's idea here is? Is there a disturbance, guys? Okay, so idea of queen d7 is slightly deep. Firstly, it's protecting this c6 bishop. Samitra, yes, a5 is a plan in future. You're right. It is one of the plans. And yes, Sahil, you're right. So the plan is to prevent knight from getting to a4 when b4 is played. So after h3, if he had played b4 right here, then the knight would go to a5, and then the knight would be on c5 again. So you're giving him this entry square. Okay, thank you, Sayam and Sahil. Um, that's the reason he played queen d7. So this is an example of prophylaxis. He realized that his opponent is planning to play something and he prevented it beforehand. So that's prophylaxis. And prophylaxis is a term that was invented by Nimzowitsch. So you can imagine how good he must be at it. Queen d7 to prevent knight a4 for b4, and king h2 was played. So here black didn't hurry to play b4 because this is something that he can play later on. He wants to improve the position of the black pieces. And can you suggest a move here for black? b4 is not the move, but something that improves the position of his pieces. Can be the rook or the knight, or something that gives a threat to the white king. Okay, so here there was another interesting idea that I'll tell you. Apart from b4, the idea of queen d7 was to play something like queen b7, then get the knight to d7, then knight b6, and again the knight is a ghost for white, because again the knight on c4 will be very strong. So queen b7 was one plan, and to just get the knight to d7, this and here. If he had played knight d7 earlier, I'm sorry, I'll just quickly go back. If this was played here, maybe there was a possibility to play something like this, because rook attacks the c6 bishop, and again you have this c5 square for the knight. Sayam, you are right, rook c8 is a possibility. So this was a possible continuation, but obviously it's good for white here because the knight gets to c5 on time. That's the reason he first protected it. And now after king h2, he has two options. I think in the game he wanted to play queen b7, which was an interesting idea, and then get the knight to c4 as I mentioned. And rook c8 is interesting, Sayam, because it's a good move. You're taking control of the open file. It's a good move, but there is something slightly better and slightly deeper. So that's the reason he first played for king h2. He played knight h5. So knight h5 has a lot of purpose, because suddenly there is never going to be a threat on c7 square because of the rook, because this bishop is taken care of. This bishop will have to move, and when the bishop moves you will have some breaks like this, or then you can decide to play bishop d6. Damn, that's an amazing maneuver that you figured out. It's a great move, because knight b1 is slightly difficult to figure out, but it's a good move, I must say. Do you have a rating? So knight h5 was played to play bishop d6 and something along those lines, because this king on h2 is slightly weak. So again, if bishop goes to d2, as you mentioned, Sayam, knight b1 and knight d2 won't be possible. So that can be another move why he played knight h5. So he played bishop d2, and if what happens to bishop e3 is basically f5 can be played, and f4 will be in tempo, because this bishop will be under attack, and you will probably have to capture, and there'll be a lot of weakness on this king side. That's great, Sayam. You are absolutely right with the maneuver. So that was a possibility, but he played bishop d2. He wanted to play it safe, probably, and f5 again. So right now you must be wondering, this e5 square is weak because I pushed this pawn, and suddenly if the knight can jump to e5, it will be very difficult for black with this queen and bishop. It will be slightly difficult, but it is going to take 3 moves for white to reach this e5 square with his knight. So it's a good thing to remember when the knight is on a diagonal like this on c3 and e5. Just try to understand what I'm saying. There is one diagonal square in between. Then it takes 3 moves to attack that square and 4 moves to reach it. So however the knight is placed, like you can take any path. So 1, 2, 3 and then 4. I'm just hypothetically showing you. So you need 4 moves to reach e5, and that's going to take a lot of time because you don't even have the right squares for your pieces. So f5 is a good move here, and it's not that weakening. Also here my idea is to play f4 and create some weakness, or at least make you push this g4 pawn, and have some ideas with bishop d6 or some sacrifice on g3, something on that path. Okay, queen d1 was played. So can you tell me what queen d1 was played for? Why was queen d1 played? Any idea? You can write down in the live chat, guys. So queen d1 was played because he himself wanted to play something like a3 and then b4, so that he also has some control. And also this queen probably can attack this h5 knight at some point. So that's the reason queen d1 was played. Yes, Soumitra, you're absolutely right. It was played to play e4. Yes, you're right, Sayam. So that's the reason queen d1 was played. And what do you think should black play here? Sunil, you're right, to attack the knight. Correct. What should black play here? Yes, Sunil, you're right, absolutely right. There can be threats with move like e4. That's the reason queen here and the knight here. So you're right. Okay, so what should black play here, guys? It's a very nice move. And Sayam, you already mentioned something related to this. Okay, so I'll just tell you the move. b4 was played. So this knight is a really sad piece. As you can see, it doesn't really have a square, even though it's in the center, pretty close to the center. It has no square except for b1. So it has to go back to his home. Yes, Sanil, you're right. So no this, no this, this or this. He just has to go back. And now, what do you think should black play? I mentioned this earlier. Yes, Sam. You can just see here and compare. Look at the pieces. This here, bishops, knights, all black's pieces are active. And even though there is some weakness on this e5 square, there's nothing that white can do to take advantage of it. And also this knight may look as if it's in the corner, but it is still going to assist in the attack later on. Soumitra, bishop a4 is a good move. You're absolutely on the right track. But bishop b5 was played in the game. I think for bishop a4, he just didn't want any normal move to be played by white. So b3, then again, anyways, you have to play this. So probably that's the reason he played bishop b5. Bishop a4 is worth considering. But after b3, bishop b5, maybe he wanted to have the c4 square, and if he directly plays bishop b5, then white would have to waste another move to play b3 and then control this. So I think that's the reason he played bishop b5 first and not bishop a4, bishop b5. Sayam, yes, bishop b5 was played. So here the idea is clear. You in a way prevent this move because you're pinning this, first idea, and the second idea is to attack the e2 pawn. So after, yes, you're right, to pin e2 pawn. After f4 is played, if he doesn't capture and he just ignores, if white just ignores and plays something like, let me just make a spare move for white here so that I can show you the idea. So in case b3, then f4, and if something like g4 maybe, then you have this move. Okay, not this, but if he just ignores and plays bishop e1 in order to protect g3, then you have this f3 move, and when he captures you can take, and this f1 will be hanging. So that could be the other idea. So it assists in playing f4. b3 was not played obviously, and he realized that the e2 pawn, white realized that the e2 pawn is pinned, so he played rook g1 so that he can have some counterplay on the g file if f4 is played. So f4, then he can take, and then maybe this square and this g7 pawn can be under attack later on because of the rook. So here for rook g1, black played bishop d6, which is a simple move, right? Because he just wants to improve his pieces. He takes care of this e5 square weakness, he covers it with the bishop, he attacks this g3 pawn. Also this queen can suddenly come to this side, and you can even get the knight back later on. So a lot of possibilities here. Hello Mayur. Yes, you're right. Yes, you're right. So bishop d6 was played with the idea of f4, and white played e4 with the idea of capturing this knight. So what do you think should black play here? Suddenly after e4, e5 is a threat, and knight f6, then there can be e5, so you will lose one piece. So what do you think should black play here? You should always be on the look for such move, guys, because you can completely strangulate your opponent, you can completely suffocate him, and then I don't know, there's some different sense to that victory when you kind of win, when your opponent has no counterplay, you give him nothing, and then you just directly win the game. Any suggestions here, guys, for black? It's slightly difficult, but try to think. Don't worry about material, that's the hint, and think about activity. Okay, so here f into e4 was played, and the idea is that you get two pawns for the knight. So you get this rook on f2, and you have these two extra pawns and the rook on the 7th rank. So that's a good compensation for the knight. That's what Nimzovic thought, and he just played this because it's not easy for white to develop this b1 knight. This bishop g2 is a sad piece. It's just there, it's not doing much. Rook g1 is doing nothing. Rook c1 is also misplaced. Okay, it's on the c file, but it's not really aiding in anything. Also this bishop here, it's again just there, and if this bishop is moved, then the b2 pawn will be lost. Hello Manan. F4 was interesting, Sanil and Sayam. F4 was interesting, but after takes, and takes, you probably want to play this, but e5 is the problem here, and you can get the same position with your pawn on e4 instead of white's pawn on e4. So you just compare the two positions. After f into e4, you get the same position, queen into h5 and rook into f2, but you have an extra pawn, and that's the difference, I think. Sorry guys. So I think that's the major difference. I hope I'm clear. Yeah. So rook into f2, and just imagine the pieces, guys. There's nothing that white can do here. This queen on h5 is just I don't know what it's doing on h5, but it has no good square. There's nothing that white can do. So it's already some sort of zugzwang, because whatever move he makes, he is losing some piece. So if he moves this bishop, then this b2 pawn is under attack. Then if he moves this knight here, then obviously it can't really move. You can't move the bishop. This rook has no good squares. And queen g5 was played because he just wanted to protect this. He just wanted to protect this g3 pawn, and maybe prevent e3 or something like that, because right now there's a threat in the position, which is bishop d3. And after bishop d3, you are suddenly threatening to capture b1, and then d2 would be hanging. So that's the reason queen g5 was played. And now what do you think should black play here? How can you bring all your pieces attack? a3. Okay, a3 is a possibility, but for a3, like you meant here, a3 I can just play a5 and I'm good, because even if you capture, I can get the rook on a2 or a1, and I have plans with the rook now. And nothing has changed for white, except there's no a2 pawn and a6 pawn. So I don't think a3 could have been played, but it's not making much of a difference. It is going to be still the same for white. So queen g5, and Sam, you are absolutely right. Rook a8 is correct on a new 2. And the idea here is you just get the rook in attack, and also you have this dangerous move coming up, rook f3, attacking this, and you can no longer capture with the bishop. So rook will be on f3, and it will be a very strong piece. Also, another thing is bishop somewhere here, and this, it's a possibility. So yes, Al, you're right, rook a8. So here black understood that, white understood that rook f3 is the threat. So that's the reason he played king h1. And now this bishop is no longer pinned, so he can capture here if rook f3 is played. What do you think should black play here? There are some vulnerable pieces in the position. I would like you to spot them and attack them. Slightly difficult. I'll wait for you guys, because it's really interesting and you will like it. Okay, so try to think, what can you attack? Then bishop d3 is a good move. It is possible. It's possible because I think your plan is to play something like you want to capture here, then attack this queen, and then d2 piece will be hanging. I think that's what your plan is. I'm not wrong. And it's a good move. It's not a bad move, but actually here the compensation is so much that black is already better. You won't believe, but black is already better because he has lot of active pieces, and black has one knight less, but then his activity is just too strong. At 6 I can just go back queen e3 maybe. There's something better. You are right. You have to do something about the queen, and that's the reason rook f5 was played. So you ask the question to the queen where it wants to go. So once it's decided that the queen wants to be on g4 or h4 or e3, then you can decide what you want later on. So here, what do you think? What happens after something like queen g4? Okay, Sahil, I think. Okay, you mean h6, queen e3, rook e2. But what happens to something like this? This is not a bad move, h6, but you can trap the queen in a way. So that's why I'm asking. Rook at f5 sort of gives a threat of trapping the queen. What happens to queen g4? How can you trap the queen? Sanal, you're right. Bishop e2. And for queen h4, what do you play? There are two moves possible here. Yes, rook f5 is slightly better. Your move is not bad. It has a similar purpose, but he wants to save that h6 move or something else in the game. Okay, so here there are two possibilities. One is rook h5 and bishop e7. So for bishop e7, there is just one slight tactic trap sort of, and he can survive because of this check. Because if you take, then he can capture, and suddenly this pawn is weak. Also some threats here, and that's the reason bishop e2 is correct, but bishop e7 rook c8 is the defense, because for king f7 this pawn can be captured, and at least the queen is getting saved. So that's the reason rook h5 is correct, because there's no possibility of saving the queen. I mean, you can get the queen, the whole queen, then why get the rook, right? So that's the only reason. Otherwise, bishop e7 is also winning. It is as good as rook h5. Just that it's just a matter of preference, and I think rook h5 is slightly better. Okay, so that's the reason why rook f5 was played, because there's no queen g4, and queen e3 was played. For queen h4 directly, now you have to play bishop e7, and this, then you can again play bishop e2. So it's similar. Queen e3 was played, and you can take 2 minutes, I would say, because it's a difficult move, and it is a move that just wins the game. The game ends in 3 moves, guys. You can only imagine. And there's going to be a Zugzwang soon. I'll show you why. But for now, you can suggest a move. Few of you already suggested something similar. Your idea is absolutely correct if you are planning to play rook e2. But for rook e2, the queen escapes here. So how can you prevent it from escaping? We just don't want the queen to escape. We want to suffocate him. So try to think of a move where white is completely, cramped, and he can't do anything. There's no movement for his pieces. Try to completely suffocate him. Okay, so here, Sayam, you're right. You're playing wonderful, Sayam. You even suggested that knight b1, knight d2, and it's great. Bishop d3 was played. And now suddenly there's no escape route for the queen, and this bishop kind of hinders all white's activity. Suddenly all his pieces are not sudden, it was gradual, but you can see that this knight here, this bishop, they have no job. Like, this bishop is just there, it's not even pinned, but it can't really play to f1 because rook f3 can be played, and so many threats for white to defend here. White here played rook c e1 in desperation because there's nothing that he can do. He can, how can he try to prevent rook e2 otherwise? So he just played rook c1 in order to protect that e2 square. And now I would like you to take some time and think of a move that completely strangulates white, paralyzes white. I love this game because of this move, like this one move, and white just resigned. And let me give you a hint. When you're already better, don't complicate. Just play simple chess. Like, don't try to complicate the position. Bishop f1 is hanging because one second. Bishop d3, bishop f1, it's hanging. It's like you can count like this: one, two, and three, and just two supporters. So that's the reason it's hanging. I can just take here. It's free piece. Better, and there's just something. It's just beautiful to watch. And here, just try one more time. Just try one more time, and don't complicate. Even after bishop into g3, I think he can just take, because now this rook on g1 suddenly will be active, and he can maybe do something about this bishop and take on g7. And even though it will be like he's giving up the rook, but he will have two pieces, and maybe he can do something about it. So don't complicate it, keep it simple. Okay, so I'll tell you the move, and I love this move. h6 was played. Sam, you're right, possible. Queen of 7 is absolutely possible, there's nothing wrong in it. It's a good move since you're improving the queen. I think I like this move. Yeah, queen of 7 is possible, but try to imagine you play h6 and white resigns. So the point here is that you want to take away this g5 square from the queen. That is the only square that it can go to after rook f3 is played. So that's the reason h6 was played. So you take away this square. That's the reason, that's the speciality about h6. And here I think Nimzovic's thinking was, he thought, what happens if I play something like rook f3, because it's a good move, but what if I sacrifice again? And he can take, I can take, but now the queen goes to g5. So how can I prevent the queen from going to g5? If the queen doesn't go to g5, then I'm already winning the queen. So that's how he figured out about prophylaxis. So he thought, what can his opponent do after he makes a move? That's the reason he covered this g5 square with h6. Another move that was possible was bishop e7. Manan, one second, I'll just answer to Manan. Rook into g2. Rook into g2 is interesting. But after rook into g2, I think the queen will go to g1 now. It's a bad square, but okay, queen has a hiding spot on g1 now suddenly. I think that's the reason rook into g2 was not played. And here another possibility was bishop e7. So bishop e7, again taking away this square from the white queen. Sorry guys, is there a disturbance? Can you just tell me? some construction work going on outside. Okay, so yeah, at 6, and say I'm queen f7, and later on you can play at 6, but if it's possible to play at 6 right then and there, then why not, right? So at 6, and I want you to tell me what white can do here, because it's like whatever he does, he'll lose something. There's no move left that can protect him. So I'll just show you. You can keep suggesting me moves for white here. Like, if you want to play king h2, then I'll refute it with this, because again, the bishop is pinned and you can't really capture. There's no bishop f1, there's no rook f1, there is no rook f1, there's no rook e2. So all the rook moves, rook moves are done. Rook d1 and rook c1 loses to rook e2. So we'll go one by one. Wait. So this bishop can't move, this rook can't move. If this rook moves, then there's rook e2. If the king moves to h2, then this bishop is pinned. The knight can't move. The bishop too can't move, because bishop c1 means losing this piece. And it's literally, you have all the pieces. You have in fact a piece additional, but you still can't move them. And that's the power of Zugzwang. So did you like the game, guys? Can you suggest a move for white here? Okay, Sayam, b3 is possible, but b3 just a5, and you have prolonged it for a move. In fact, I think I can even just play rook f3 here. Not a problem. Sacrifice here. Should be good for me. Lose the queen. And maybe later on the rook too. So I love this game for the very reason, this h6 move, and suddenly it's just over for white. Okay, let's move on to the next game, guys. Did you like it? There's another move if you want. g4 is a move, but rook f3, and now if he takes, then you have rook h2 checkmate. So that's another thing. Let's move on to the next example. Just a moment. Okay, so this was my game against a player from Turkey. I played this in a World Junior, and it was back in 2016. So she was rated 2077, and I'm going to show you the position. I won't show you the opening because we played Catalan. I was white, and now, yeah, Manan, it's an absolute treat to watch that game. So this was the position in the game, and as you can see, I've already pointed out the I've already highlighted the squares that are attacked here. This h6, this e6 pawn is attacked with the bishop and rook, and the c4 and d4 pawns are preventing this knight from going anywhere, and this d5 square is also under my control. This pawn structure is called breakwater, and it is a strong pawn structure to have if you have this bishop against something like a triangle here, like this pawn structure. So this is a great pawn structure to have against f7, g6 and h7, a thing to remember. So queen into f3, and she played f5 because she wanted to protect this, and I played queen c6. So here again it's slightly some sort of zugzwang, because the knight can't move. There is nothing that moves the queen from here, because knight b8 would mean the rook a8 is hanging and I can capture it. There is no queen b7 to exchange the queen because d7 is hanging. If she moves the king, then I have this break if I want, or this h5 break. So this is not the main position. I'm coming to the main position. I'm just showing you how I played. knight f6 and bishop g2. So my threat here is to capture this exchange. So that's the reason I played bishop g2. And also here it's good to remember the bishop on h3 is not doing much. My rooks are active, my queen is active, my pawns are controlling the center well. It's just the bishop that is not active. So I brought the piece back in the game by bishop g2. Rook b8 was played. Now rook d3. So here I have two ideas here. One is to play rook a3 and do something about this a7 pawn, which is now weak because she played rook b8. And the other plan is to play rook e3. So it's a rook lift and I want to double the rooks. But I didn't want to reveal my idea. If I had played rook e3, it would mean revealing the idea, because she would understand that I'm playing rook e1 on the next move. That's the reason I played rook d3. And whenever possible, guys, you should try to hide your ideas. You shouldn't reveal them so easily, because as I said, your opponent could do prophylaxis. He could prevent your ideas on time, and then suddenly all your pieces look weird once your ideas are prevented. And psychologically, it's very irritating when all of your plans are ruined. So rook d3 and keeping the rook e3 idea slightly doubtful for her. Queen d7 was played. She wants to exchange the queens so that she can have space. It's a good concept to remember, that whenever you have more space, you shouldn't exchange pieces, because you already have a lot of space and your opponent doesn't have space. So he is going to find it difficult to maneuver with very little space and too many pieces. So make sure that you keep your opponent with a lot of pieces if he has less space. Okay, that is slightly for the later stage, when you are, you are a rated player, and when you play rated games and you're playing a strong opposition, then you have to think about all of these concepts. Rook d e3 is played. So now she gets the idea, but knight g4 is not possible, which was earlier possible here on rook e3 was possible, and now it's not possible because the queen is hanging. King f7 was played, and now I captured. So you must be wondering, why did I capture? But knight into d7, and I saw some variation which you'll get to know. Bishop c6. So I have pinned this knight. Is there a lag, guys? Can you just say yes so that I know if there's a lag? Because I think there is a lag. I can't see the live chat. Am I audible, guys? Okay, so here she played rook b8 to protect this knight, and I played d5. So this break was something that I had planned. Okay, thank you, Manana number Arnav. So d5, I played this, and now e5 is not possible because I can take here and then take on e5. So I played d5 because I was sure that she will capture, and bishop into d5, check. Thank you, Kshitij. King f8, and now I played rook e6. So after rook e6, again, if she captures here, well and good for me, because I can take the rook here, and then this is a weak pawn. Rook c8, and then I can play bishop e6, pinning this knight. So she played c5 here, and now again this is the breakwater, and this pawn structure needs to be broken here. So how will you break this? So here in this pawn structure you play h5, because now if she captures, you just look at the pawns. They are all weak. And here they were all solid. They were protecting each other, but after the middle pawn is lost, all the 3 pawns are weak. She played rook into e6 here because she was frustrated and she didn't have time at this point. She took a lot of time in the opening, and she played g5. So g5 is a wrong move because I could see a geometry here, and there's a reason why I love this game, and this is one of my favorite games that I've played. Yes, Manan, you're right. h5 and h5 should be played to break this pawn structure. And now I saw some geometry here. So here I played rook h6. Okay, so try to get the idea here. King g7, and now I play rook d6 back. So I am threatening to capture this knight by pinning it with bishop c6. So she has to play king f8. Now I'll just try to tell you the difference. The rook was on e6. If I directly go here, then it is her move to play. And if she plays king e7, again, it's bad for me. So this was the idea. That's why I played rook h6 first. So I make sure that the king goes to g7. And now I play rook d6. After king f8, it is again my move. That's the difference, small difference. And now I play king g2. And when she plays king e7, I played rook e6 check. And again king f8, I go rook h6. So I'm getting all these tempos and improving my king. So king g7 again, and then I go rook d6. Okay, so it's some sort of pendulum here. And king f8, again it's my move in the same position, but I'll get the king. So I got 3 extra moves by now in the same position. So that's the power of Zugzwang. Again, king e7 was played by her, and I played rook e6, check, king f8, and now again I go rook h7, rook h6. So king g7, then I again repeat with rook d6. It looks slightly weird for the person who's looking, and he doesn't see that the king has moved. It may look as if it's a perpetual game or perpetual thing happening. And she played king f8, and now I finally have to take a break so that my king can enter, and that's the reason I played f4. So that was the small pendulum that I played, g into f4 and takes. So if she plays king e7 here, I would like you to answer, what should I play here? How do I repeat the pendulum? Thanks, Kshitij. It's a nice geometry, right? Guys, can you tell me what happens? What should white play here to repeat the pendulum? If black plays king e7 here, she didn't play king e7, she played b5. What happens to king e7? Actually, here my opponent was really shocked because she thought, what am I trying to do? Because every time I got extra tempos and she couldn't do anything. Yes, Arnav, you're right. Rook e6 and now king f8. So what do you do here again? Okay, so you again play rook h6 and the pendulum. It keeps going on. So king g7 and rook d6 back. So you're threatening the same thing again. Yes, Tapanna. You're threatening the same thing with bishop c6, and again if king f8, then you move king h4. So you're seeing how I improved my position, and black has not done anything. He has just gotten rid of this pawn and g3 pawn. That's the only thing that has happened for black, otherwise it's the same. So I got like 1 2 3 4 5 moves extra because of the pendulum technique, and it's a Zugzwang here for black, sort of, because if he plays anything else then with these pieces, then he loses, because if he plays a6, Then I can play bishop e6. No, not bishop e6. I'll just play bishop. Okay, I'll just get the king right now. But this b6 pawn will be weak, and I can obviously capture it later on. So a6 is not possible. h6 is not possible. This pawn is blocked. This pawn is blocked. b5 was played in the game, and she lost this pawn. The rook is not. The rook cannot go anywhere. The knight is immobile, and the king is moving, but it's a part of the pendulum again. So rook e6, king f8, and you keep repeating this, and you slowly enter. You win these pawns. You can even win both the pawns. So that was my game against Soinolu Narmin, and I loved this game when I played it, and when I played those moves. I was really happy. And here she played b5 after gf4. She didn't repeat. She didn't let me. You're right, Kshitij. She should have. No, she should have She should have sacrificed the h7 pawn. But again, it's difficult. Sure, Sayam. I can provide you the PGN. Maybe in the comment section I can tag this game. So that was the pendulum, and she should probably have captured on h7, sacrificed on h7. But again, the h5 pawn is very strong. So let's just go back and see if that's possible. Maybe here, if she sacrifices the pawn. But what will she play? Like, even if she plays knight e5, I can take this, and then rook h8, and this h5 pawn is very strong. So probably that's the reason she didn't give h7 pawn. Okay, so that was about today's lecture, guys. I hope you liked it. I am coming up with a masterclass on the Unacademy educator platform, so you can check it out. And good luck, guys. See you in the